Tim Facciola is a multi-award winning fantasy author. When he's not working on his own story, he's helping others develop theirs as an author coach. He joins me today on Uncorking a Story to talk about his career and epic fantasy trilogy, A Vengeful Realm. Welcome to Uncorking a Story, Tim.
Mike, so great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excited to have you here, Tim. I'm curious, where does your story as an author begin?
So it not at all where you'd think. It was in a fitness gym, 2 stories underground in Manhattan. I was working with a client. It's like one of those 5:30 a.m. sessions, and I had just had like a crazy night of dreams again. And I'm talking to my client about these dreams, and she's like, "Are you like a creative person?" And at the time, I'm working 80 hours a week as a personal trainer, and I'm 22 years old in Manhattan, and I'm grinding my tail off. And am I a creative person? Well, I was in a band. The band I wrote the lyrics. That was primarily like I played bass, but I wrote the lyrics. I did not sing, not in my skill set. So, um, but like I wasn't doing that anymore. So I'm having all these crazy dreams, and she's like, "If you're a creative person and you're not creating, you probably just need a new outlet." And the band had recently broken up, so I didn't have that creative outlet. So I was like, "What is something that I could do by myself that would be cheap?" And I came upon writing and very quickly found out that both of those things are not true. But that's how it started. So I started writing A Vengeful Realm this like about 10 years ago, almost to the day. And I wanted this I wanted something that was like epic in scale. This is around when a Game of Thrones, the HBO adaptation, was really picking up steam, and I was like, I like that, and I was always a big fan of Roman mythology and anything to do with Gladiator or Spartacus. Like I loved that concept of the fight for freedom. So like all of these things were just kind of very top of mind for me, and I said, why not just I have to create something because I'm going crazy. Uh, why not try my hand at writing? And I here we are 10 years later.
So going back to underground fitness or the underground gym, you talk about a crazy night of dreams. Were you having dreams of gladiators? Was that
Well,
a thing for you, or
I wouldn't
was it?
say it was gladiators per se, but this concept of being in an arena and fighting for my life, that was something that I was having like routinely. I think that was more the work environment I was in, and it was more anxiety and depression driven than anything else. But that's hindsight looking back. But yeah, it was just like a lot of a lot of movement. A lot of moving parts. I work in fitness. I study kinesiology, how people move, how things move. And then I was like in my free time watching shows like Game of Thrones. So I guess like it that enmeshed in my brain. My not. I also worked. It was a weird time. But I'd sleep in 4 hour increments. So I'd sleep from like midnight to 4, work 5:30 to like 10 a.m., and then go home, nap in the middle of the day, do my evening sessions, and then repeat. So it was like my day was split into 2 8-hour shifts essentially of sleep, work, sleep, work. And that was one day. So I don't think that's good for the brain, the human brain. Maybe, but it definitely gave me this like uh, come to Jesus moment of I need to find something that allows me to create to get this energy out. And I've been doing it now 10 years, which is crazy to think about. It's definitely been a like wow, it's been that long.
Well, I can imagine because I work in Manhattan as well, and I've done it for I don't know, almost on and off for 30 years. kind of working in Manhattan, especially the hours you're working and the industry you're working in, can feel like being in an arena where you're
Yeah.
constantly fighting because it's so hard just to keep it all going, especially if you're living in Manhattan too, because it's not exactly the most inexpensive place to live. So I get that you're grinding. I'm curious, was the Vengeful Realm series the first thing you tried to write, and you took it over 10 years to do it, or were you writing other things as well?
So I did try one other story type before A Vengeful Realm, but otherwise, I would say when I say 10 years of A Vengeful Realm, it was 10 years of A Vengeful Realm. I did have some other things slip in the midst of that. One of those things that came out about in the midst of that is actually my forthcoming book that's coming out in January. But I did try my hand at it was going to be some type of like apocalypse now, like the apocalypse is happening now, and how are people responding to it? And it was based in New York. It just became all too real. Like I was at an age where 9/11 was very impactful in my life. I grew up just outside of the city in Rockland County. So I had friends whose parents worked in the city and commuted in. I had um, classmates whose parents were or brothers or siblings were in the city at the time. So it's just like it was you couldn't get away from it. And I definitely think that I found that concept of what would I have done if I were there when it's happening? And I thought that was a really cool idea, but it just became too real, too scary, I was like, no, 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 no. I need something that's a little bit more uh, escapism, a little bit more fantastical. And that was why I went more fantasy. Um, and once again, I think always having that, um, like, that appeal. I was like always had this affinity towards things like gladiator, things like Greco-Roman myth, and um, that just felt like more. I want to spend time here. You know what I mean? I want to get lost in this world, and I did for a decade. But yeah, that became like the main project, and there were a couple times where like the first draft of book one, right? So book one comes in at like 140 something thousand words. The first draft I sent to an editor was 278,000 words.
That's a lot of words.
That's a lot of words. And then remember when I said, like, oh, it's something you can do by yourself? Well, then I got an editor, and the editor was like, this is fun. This is great. Do me a favor, cut it in half. And I was like, oh, okay. Um, and she was very much at the mindset. She's like, you have a lot to learn. You can do this one of two ways. You can keep apply, like we can go through, and I'll keep teaching you new stuff, and we can keep working on the same project, or you can take what you learned from this one and write the next thing. I was like, I kind of really want to do this one the justice I feel it deserves. So that's why it was such a long process. Most people would just say, "Okay, next book," and I just couldn't get this story, this world, out of my head and off of my heart. It just felt like I felt called to tell this story. And so I one of the themes of my life is I'm either too stubborn or too stupid to give up. So it's like, okay, I'm gonna make this story work, and I want to do the best thing that I want to do the best for this story that I believe it deserves. So the perfectionist in me said, let's make it happen. So rewrote book one, rewrote book one again. Like each time kind of picking up some new things, like what is the heart of the story, how to actually weave a theme throughout a story, how to structure a novel in such a way that it has this catharsis and subliminal messaging sprinkled throughout, so it doesn't kind of feel like you're getting beaten over the head with and that's the moral, you know what I mean? Like having this come about organically so that the reader is learning the core messages along with the character, like having that almost like narrowing the gap between the person hold like the pages, person, book, words on a page, trying to narrow that gap and create a degree of immersion that was um, more impactful. I feel like to your point, we're talking about the speed of life. And it's not just Manhattan. The speed of life is it very all consuming, and maybe now more than at any other point in human history. So like something like taking the time to learn a skill, or taking the time to read a book, but not just read the words, but engage with it in a way that's lasting and meaningful. I wanted to create something that had a depth to it that was worth engaging with, and not just reading to, read a book and say, I read another book. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I think you get 240,000 words. Most commercial fiction, especially for a first-time author, between 70 and 90,000 words, maybe, right? So handing in 240,000 plus words to an editor, it's almost like a 19-year-old having a 17-page resume.
Yeah.
It's like there's a lot there. So, and I'm sure you learned a lot about the craft just by
Yes.
rewriting and rewriting. Did you take that first book and then put it into a trilogy, or was that really book one and then you had to go do books two and three?
That was really book one.
Wow.
There was a lot. I feel like I really there were a couple things, right? So I think when I did the typical stuff that like now as an author coach, I see people doing all the time. I'm like, you don't need to give us every detail about how the world works. And I think it's so cool who, the people who are out there who, they design their map, and then they design the city maps within the world map, and then they have like, well, here's how many people are here, and here's the percentage of people. I'm like, so no one cares. Like, that's really cool that you did that, but reality is it doesn't tell a story. So I think in the beginning I had a lot of detail, especially about how the politics worked, um, and how the magic system worked. And I think there's a degree of, most people will assume it's a soft magic system until told otherwise. Most people will assume something works until it becomes a problem solving tactic. If the story needs to solve, if like the character needs to solve a problem, then we need to know, okay, what are the systems at play? But I think I was just oversharing everything. That was a part of it. And the other part of it was I had a cast of 10 characters, 10 point of view characters, and I cut that down. The book, the trilogy has 7 main point of view characters throughout. So um, those 7 point of view characters at one point was closer to 10 main, and then there was like 12 to 14, so like two to four others who would have chapters here and there. So cutting down the number of perspectives, I ended up combining 2 main characters into one, since they served a similar role function and had a similar archetype, but in 2 different parts of the world. So I tried to just make the world smaller, make it more containable, um, make the cast of characters more efficient. So there were elements, because like a lot of the books I was reading books like A Song of Ice and Fire, I was reading books like the Stormlight Archive, The Wheel of Time, books that are 300,000 words. So I was like, oh, this is this is what I'm supposed to be writing. No, no, and like my editor, who has worked with Brandon Sanderson, she was like, that's very sweet to think. It's like, yeah, you're talking to a child. It's like, that's a great idea, don't do that. It's not like, they have, you know they have written the rules. It's not even that they know, like, they can write the rules at this point, they can break whatever they want. But this isn't the way into the industry, and if you want to do this, you can, and I can show you how to do that. Or if you actually want to make this um marketable and something that most people will take a gamble on for a first time author, we can do that too. So I took it as an opportunity to funnel it down to what is the heart of the story. As much as there's all these things that I think are cool and I'd like to talk about and I'd like to explore, I don't have to. Um, or I don't have to with the page space investiture that I originally set out with when I didn't really know what I was attempting to do. So if I had released this as that first draft or that third draft, if I had tried publishing it at that stage, and it wouldn't be something that I'm proud of today. Um, and I think that this is something that I've now. So I have the fourth book coming out in January. I have a fifth book that I'm finishing up now. Hopefully, will be finished by the end of the year. So, like having a couple, like having done this a little bit and have like a system down and an understanding of what I'm trying to do and how, I still feel like, yeah, I'm still so proud of that original trilogy. And that's something that I hope continues to be the case. Like you want to get better with every, spending your 10,000 hours plus, you want to continue to get better at your craft, at what you do. And I think I will, but I think I'll always have an appreciation and like a pride in what I did, as opposed to like some authors who are just like, yeah, that first book, like, you can read it if you want. Like, I hope that's never the case for me.
Yeah. Well, it's not unlike working out a gym, right? The only way to get stronger, to improve your fitness, is to do it frequently, right? And writing is the
Mhm.
same thing. You gotta work on that muscle memory. I'm curious, what did you take from book one? So finishing book one, into books two and three in terms of lessons learned about how to approach the writing process.
So very much so. Everything that so book one was really refining my process. And kind of starting super small, because I think what I said was I want an immersive world. So I'm going to build big world and then try and find like, well, what's the story within this big world? As opposed to for the second and third books, I was like, here is the heart of the story. And here is a 2 sentence summary of what I want this story to like capture, right? Um, so I started with that, and that's more of a plot centric, like, character stakes plot. Um, that's what I want in these 2 sentences. So starting with that, and then okay, from there, let's make a 7 point plot outline. So 2 sentences turns into like 7 to 14. From that 7 to 14, can I write a 1 page synopsis? Okay, if I can write a 1 page synopsis, this is the heart of the story. Now, do I like it still when I have it in that written form? If I don't, or something feels off, I'll be able to tell here, as opposed to writing, 180,000 word draft and then going like, ooh, that's a real mushy middle where I'm just kind of meandering, or there's not a whole lot of focus there. So like I didn't have any of those types of problems the second time around. Or like the character's moral development, like why are they making this decision now? Like I had a system for, okay, at this point in the plot, this is where I want them to start thinking a little broader. At this point, I want them to kind of start acquiring this sense of principle. Those weren't things even on my radar in the early going. It was just like cartoon character level sit down and type stuff. So I became a very heavy plotter. And the first book was plotted, but I didn't have a system for it. Now I had a system, and I spent a lot of time like reverse outlining that first one. But for the second one, I had that 2 sentence, 7 to 10, 7 to 14 sentence. That 1 page synopsis, and then I did a chapter by chapter outline for each point of view character. So doing that 7 to 10 for each character, I was like, okay, here's their stories. Now let's look at it all out, and where do they kind of match up? Where can I intertwine and entangle? I really love when stories use the value of perspective to make the reader go like, huh, it all made sense here, and I was fully in agreement with this character, character A, but now seeing it from character B's point of view, now I'm like, well, maybe character B has a point, and now all of a sudden the reader has to engage with the text and actually ask questions as opposed to just make assumptions. I always love books that can make me do that. So I wanted a story that could do that. So getting to look at it in outline form and see, okay, well, this is going to position the reader for this type of experience, and this is going to position the reader for a diametrically opposed but still equally believable experience on this side. And there's always going to be some people who lean one way or the other, but my goal was to find, can I create this balance? The series is called The Scales of Balance, and um, finding balance, whether it's work life balance or whatever kind of, like, I've always found that finding that equilibrium is super important. And so thematically, this story is very much like a life lesson for myself that needs to be continually reminded. But going back through a having a structure, having a goal, having a here's the external plot, here's the external plot for each character, here's the internal plot, here's the thematic overtone I want for the story. Having all of that mapped out before starting to write, it really unlocked what drafting was like. Whereas I should also mention the pandemic happened. So instead of writing maybe, a chapter a week, I was writing every day. And getting that opportunity to be in my story, because I was working from home, everything was virtual, and that kind of gave me new. I wasn't commuting. I wasn't like, it changed everything. So I had that going for me. Um, but that allowed me to put more time into the prep because um, what I learned with book one is you're going to put in the work. You're either putting it in on the front end or the back end. And book one, I had to put in so much work on the back end. Whereas books two and three, I was like, I want these first drafts to be so clean that all they need is a copy and proofread. And that's what happened. I wrote, if book one took me 3 years to write the first draft, um, granted, first draft was way longer. But book two, I wrote that first draft in 3 months. Book three, I wrote it in 3.5 months. Like I churned them out because I had this process, I had this system, and I'm like, once again, my vocation is finding efficiency and movement, biomechanically. Like, yes, here's the overall, but like, where's the missing link? Where can we get more out of? How can we make this more efficient? So I love systems that create efficiency and streamline things. And book one allowed me to formulate, well, what is that? What does that look like for me? Um, and then also, once again, I lean a lot on my profession. Like, I have to teach skills. I have to break down complex motor patterns into bite size, approachable, and digestible learning opportunities. So I like to say, it's one thing to learn a skill, it's another thing to be able to learn a skill well enough to teach a skill. So if I feel comfortable doing it enough, so if I feel comfortable teaching something, I need to be real comfortable, real confident with it. So I try to, even if it's not something I'm going to be teaching, I want to learn it to that degree. So that became like, if I were trying to teach myself, how would I do this? And then, again, during the pandemic, I had met a writing group, fell in with a writing group, and it became, oh, how do you do this? I was like, oh, I do this. And they're like, oh, can you show me that? And I realized I enjoyed showing people that. And that's how that kind of evolved and took off from there. Because systems make things easier, whether it's front end or back end. I prefer to do a lot of front end, make it easy on myself on the back end. But some people are discovery writers and want to, explore it as they go. But even then, you're going to need a back end means of making this all come together and make sense and have that same catharsis at the end for the reader experience to actually be what you want it to be.
Yeah. It sounds like book one was really your School of Hard Knocks MFA program. And books two and three was like applied knowledge from that.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah. I'm curious. So, when did you wait until all three in the trilogy were done before taking them to publication? And I'm curious what that journey was like. Did you go the query a bunch of agents route? Did you go hybrid? Did you go independent?
So I originally wanted to do traditional publishing. I had a traditional publishing contract in hand for the trilogy, even though I'd only written book one at the time. This was December of 2020. Um, I There was a pitch event. I want to say it was like the Writer's Digest virtual conference. It was the first time they had done a virtual conference. They had this virtual pitch event, and I pitched my book, and a publishing house, a small press, wanted to acquire it and the trilogy. And I was like, okay, cool, it's happening. And I'm looking at the contract, it's standard boilerplate stuff. There's nothing like, but I'm talking it over with my editor, and it just like, for me, it didn't feel right. Maybe it was the fact that like I had no idea what my life was going to look like a year from then in December of 2020. I had no idea what was happening with. At that point, I had a private training studio that was really struggling to keep the lights on amidst COVID. So I had moved my people virtually, but we still had to pay rent, which wasn't great. So there was a lot of up in the air. So the prospect of signing away the next 6 years of my life, essentially saying, okay, they're going to spend 2 years publishing book one, and then I'm going to have 2 years to write and get book two to the same degree that it's taken me, 6 to get this where I want it. That felt really like I felt uncomfortable. I didn't know if I'd be able to do it. I didn't know how I would be writing on a deadline. Um, and then also there was elements of like as I was planning out, well, what is book two? Like I had a broad strokes idea of what was going to happen in book two. I had less, even more broad strokes of what was going to happen in book three, but I was like, that doesn't feel like it's going to have this. Like, what if I want to plant the Easter eggs in book one? Like, what if I see like, ooh, if I go back and like put in these little nuggets, the reader might not be able to pick up on them on a first read through, but on a second they would. Or these are like little Easter eggs, like things to like subliminally impact later. I wanted to create that kind of reading experience because those are the books I enjoy reading. So this was really a love letter to myself. Like what I decided, like I creatively, because this what I did is not a good business strategy, which is why no traditional publisher would do this. But from a creative standpoint, because like you don't want to write 3 books to find out that book one doesn't sell well. That's just bad business, right? Write another book one. But this story was so personally important to me that I was like, I don't care if book one doesn't sell. I want to tell the story to the best of my ability. And if I have this published and I can't go back and make changes, I can't add things, I can't tweak things to further solidify what I want to do, even if it's small stuff. So it was at that point that I said, okay, I'm going to table this. The publishing industry was in a weird place anyway. I was like, maybe I'll try querying again after I've written books two and books three, and we'll see what happens. Um, by that point, I had come across a self-publishing service company that helped self-published authors like have a almost have the support staff, the support system of traditional publishing. So they had a team of editors, cover designers, they had launch teams and back end SEO and marketing consultants, and it was all under one roof. And I liked that idea. So that allowed me to, I'm going to write all three books. Once I've written all three books, I'm going to edit all three books. And then I'm going to give it to, this team of editors, this team of cover designers, and that felt more, that felt like what, that resonated better with me from a creative perspective. The ability to craft from beginning to end, see the end, go back and make tweaks to the beginning. And now we can see, okay, here is the whole thing as a whole. And now we can package it and sell it and market it, et cetera. I loved it from that perspective. Would I do it again with future books? No, but I also think that like this was like if any other project takes me 10 years, I'm gonna be very disappointed. So it was a first time. I think it was a great experience. Would I do it again the same way? No, no. Would I advise others to do it that way? Not necessarily, unless like they have control freak tendencies like me and wanted to really be in an entirely creative control and weren't so concerned about building the reader base at the onset. And I don't know. For me, it was the right choice at the right time. I'm abundantly proud of how it all came together, and I don't think, if I know this, I can assuredly say, if would have published this back in 2020, I think I would have been really disappointed um, with the process of writing while marketing for the first time. I don't think that would have worked well for me personally. So I'm glad I did it the way I did it, and I couldn't be happier with how it came out.
Yeah, you really got to put on two different hats. You got your creative hat and then you got your business hat. And, the path you chose gives you a lot more creative control over your product. The flip side is, all the work is on your shoulders, 100% of them, even though you're working with, a group that, has editors, has cover designers, you are still like the CEO, and which isn't a negative thing. But I do understand, at some point maybe you give up control to people who know the business also very well. So we'll see what happens in the future for you.
Yeah, I won't do the same. I won't do the same. And not because I'm unhappy with how this one went down. It's just it was a lot, and I don't feel the need now. I feel like, how it's good to know how things work, and having my finger in, and being in the kitchen and seeing how it's made. I have like a newfound appreciation for that. And I feel like I know the questions to ask when finding those professionals. I feel like I understand, this is what this looks like. This is what it feels like. I don't need to do it anymore. You know what I mean? Like that's great. I don't want to do it. Like not my scope of brilliance, which was why I know authors. I've met a lot of awesome creators in the time since I've published, who do it all themselves, and I'm like, bravo, more power to you. Um, it's amazing. Like there's people from all different walks of life prior to publishing, and it's amazing the skill set and how translatable other things are into the world of publishing.
Yeah. My first books were all independently published. So I was hiring outside editors, I was finding cover designers, I was doing all the marketing, all the promotion. And with my latest, I have an agent, and they are fantastic. Because they are taking a lot of stuff off my plate where I could focus more on the story versus the business side of things. Now, there's still challenges there because they're pitching publishers. I don't have to do that. But I still have to read the rejection letters. So that's
That's what, right. That's part of this industry that uh, you. So my wife went to musical theater conservatory, so her world was rejection. Like that, it's just the name of the game. You get good at it. You have thick skin. You have a short memory, thick skin, and stubborn or stupid. Just keep, pedal to the metal, keep pedal to the metal, keep the dream alive. Um, but that was something that when I was first in the querying trenches, that I, first of all, didn't know how to market my book, didn't know how to sell. Um, telling a story and selling a story are two very different things, two very different skill sets. Uh, I think I'm still figuring that part out. Honestly, I still feel like that. Um, Putting together sales packages, that's something that my new process has definitely made me better at, because I'm starting with the heart of the story, but it's still the because for this, not this one coming out in January, but the next book, I do plan on pitching for traditional publishing and trying to get an agent. um and for that project, I like starting out with, all right, this is the pitch. I started with the pitch before I wrote the book. And that feels totally different than, wow, I have this story. Now I got to figure out how I would sell it. Like that, it almost, my brain doesn't work that way. I get lost, I can't find the forest because the tree's in the way.
Fair enough. So one of the ways I like to get to know my guests a little bit more is through a few pop culture questions. So if you're
Oh
up for
boy,
it, I'd love to
hit me.
know, uh, when you were growing up, what were some of your favorite things to watch on TV?
So I was a superhero kid. So my brother and I, my brother's 2 years older, so like X-Men, Batman, Spider-Man, like, and that was like 90s animation, like at it, like there were some, like even now people reference those as like peak animation, and still make references to how talented those creators were, how effective those voice actors were, the storytelling, etc. So like, um, I really grew up on those as like a young kid. Um, and then as a like, I really fell out of like interest with TV, I'd say, for a period of time, and I was really into drawing. Um, I liked the I loved Pokemon. I was super interested in the like type based, like how the systems work, what's effective, what's ineffective, what's efficient, what's not. Um, I liked all those types of things, but I my first book series that I really fell in love with was the Animorph books. Um, and there was also like a early 2000s like Nickelodeon TV show, live action, but it was like a sci-fi space opera that was like it was like 70 books. Um, and my library carried them. So I'd get one, read, come back, return that one, get the next one. And I there was like 65 books in that series, um, and plus a couple like other things. And I got really into that. That was very, I think, what made me a nerd. I don't think I entered nerddom until that point, and then I was like, oh yeah, this is where I belong. um, but I was, I played sports growing up, so that really wasn't like TV time wasn't really something I had a lot of. But I read every night before bed. So it was Animorphs. And then like I grew up in the Harry Potter like era where everyone read Harry Potter. I guess everyone still reads Harry Potter. Like it's still but like I was 10 when Harry was getting his Hogwarts acceptance letter. So like I feel like that was very influential.
Yeah, you
Um
kind of grew up with him. What about music? What did you listen to growing up?
so Blink 182 was my jam. That was my band was called Bridge the Borders. We kind of started out as a Blink 182 cover band, and then we were like, we could probably write something too. We could probably try that. But Bridge the Borders was a Blink 182 lyric, from Every Time I Look for You. If anyone cares for the trivia. But so I was very much into like the pop punk era. And I never really left that. Like I never really left that emo phase of music. there's obviously new bands in that genre that I listen to, and I wouldn't say I'm as active in that community as I was when I was playing shows all the time. But I still like my guitarist is still my best friend, and we like all the time like, oh, have you heard this, and it go back and forth. So um, definitely still very much pop punk. Pop punk never dies.
So you weren't like writing epic fantasy songs in the band. It wasn't like,
It was not
some
like
like
Led
prog
Zeppelin.
rock,
Yeah,
Led
no, no,
Zeppelin,
no.
Rush kind of stuff.
Yeah, right. No, it was very, very upbeat pop punk. Let's soapy, syrupy types of big catchy choruses, and I'd say there was a degree of storytelling with the lyricism, but definitely not so much imagery as I have in the books. Could you imagine? They'd be like 30-minute songs. It was
That's right.
be like a Fish cover band.
How-
But
uh,
yeah, no, none of that.
What about if you can go back in time, like get into your DeLorean, hit 88 miles an hour, and whisper some words of advice into your younger self's ear? What would you tell the younger Tim?
Ooh, um, so I'm very lucky that I had my parents are great, were great at cultivating in me what I didn't have room to think of at that time. They were that voice of reason, and for whatever reason, I listened as a kid. So my mom's thing was like, always keep your options open and don't be afraid to ask why. So I think that concept, like in book two, I want to say the dedication in book two is, for every kid who asked why and every parent patient enough to go along for the ride. So I asked why a lot. I wanted to understand how things worked, why they worked, and I think that created a like all my author coaching clients. They're all like, I don't even have to ask. I just give them a look, and they're like, why? Okay, why would they do that? Why does the magic system have to be this way? Why? Take that why 6 layers deep. So um, that advice of see what keeps your options open, and and don't be afraid to ask why. That was very impactful. That advice was so good to me that I still follow it today. What would I tell myself that I didn't know? Um, I think I took myself too seriously. I don't think, and this is something that I don't even think I need to go back in time. I can just do it now, and I'd still reap a lot of benefits. But like, don't take yourself too seriously. Don't be afraid to have fun. Like, I I associate fun with mistakes. And it's how you can have fun while failing forward, while making mistakes, but understanding it's just part of the process, part of the road, part of the journey. um I definitely have a uh focus on the finish type of mindset, so like just being more present for the journey, picking your head up on a hike every like so live in Arizona now, go on hikes, and like I'm too fast up the mountain. My wife's like, stop, look up. And I'm like, oh yeah, look at that. Like it's just it's that same kind of like um focus more on the journey, I think is what I would say. In sports, it was, yeah, but we lost. It didn't matter what happened in the game. We lost. And I think like there's a degree of that's kind of bred in competitive athletics, but at the same time, it's not really a good life lesson that everything is result oriented. Um, there are such a thing as moral victories. Now, if the only thing you're getting is moral victories, then eventually that's no good either. That pendulum, once again, scales of balance. Let's find the equilibrium here. But um, I think that to quote Brandon Sanderson, you know, journey before destination. It's that's something that younger me would have benefited from as much as current me and probably still future me needs to be reminded of.
Tim, if people wanted to get in touch with you or follow you on social media, do you have a website or any social media handles you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, so I'm more active on TikTok. It's at Tim Facciola. I'm on Instagram as well, a little less active. I'm working on it, gang. I'm working on it. That is at Tim Facciola underscore the author. If you look up at Tim Facciola, it'll bring you to my fitness page, which I don't post anything on, but that's it's still there. And then my website is timfacciola.com. So um, I respond to everything. If I get an email, I respond to it. I hope that's something I can continue to do. I think that's something that's really cool. I wrote a like I've never been like a fanboy, so I don't like do that. But I wrote a an email to Michael J. Sullivan after I finished the Rhaenyra Revelations series of books, and I was just like, "Wow, that ending! Like, wow!" Like, it's just like I had nothing more to say than like, "Bravo, that was so fun to read." Like, and that was it. And he responded, and he's just like, "Thanks, I really appreciate that," and that made me feel really good. So I was like, it takes, for the most part, doesn't take that much time. But so I always appreciate people reaching out. So that's something that you want to get in touch. I will most likely respond.
Very cool. I will put all of your contact information in our show notes so people can easily click on it and not worry about how to spell Facciola. Tim, thank you so much for stopping by Uncorking a Story and letting me uncork yours.
Mike, thank you so much. Really happy to be uncorked.
Thanks for listening to Uncorking a Story. If you'd like more information about today's guest or to find out more about Mike, go to uncorkingastory.com. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review us at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Tune in every week to hear Mike Carlin uncork a new story.